Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 92 of the Podcana podcast. This week, we're going to be discussing Sapphire, like everybody else within Lorcana at the moment. Has Sapphire been power crept too much? Well, Tamatoa selling at €60. Maybe that tells the story. Let's see. There was also a 10k tournament that happened. Actually, it wasn't a 10k. I think it was a 10 case tournament that happened this past weekend. So we're going to take a look at the top 8 deck lists from that. We're also going to take a look at Moyen's deck list that he submitted for the LCCC. We actually have a new affiliation. I want to give a shout out to Vault X for partnering with us. If you guys want to save some money on some fantastic binders that I do personally use myself, be sure to use our link down below in the video description, or also code PODCANA at checkout to save yourself 10% off. Brendan, Moyen, how's it going? Brendan, you're back. It's just, I'm getting jump scared every time I see you on the podcast now.
Yeah, this one's by far the most, I don't know, what would you call it? It's like the most knee-jerk experience, because, you know, the other times it's been like things have come up and we just haven't been able to line up. EU, NA times, they're tough. Like, it's a really tight window. But now it's like, now I just like literally have no time at all. Like, I just spend every single waking hour of my life working, which is honestly, don't have any sympathy for me, because that's what I would like to be doing. Maybe not in this exact scenario, in this exact environment, but like that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But wow, I underappreciated how fast all of my time could get instantly deleted, and all my brain space as well. But I've seen some Twitter discourse, some 50-0s, some Sapphire's too strong, some ban requests. So it sounds like, I mean, I'll tell you, outside looking in, sounds like the greatest meta of all time, if you're asking me. But I'll let the experts take the wheel on that one.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, you know, Tamatoa is selling at like €60 on card market. I'm pretty sure this is like the highest we've ever seen a legendary go so far within Lorcana. Previously, it was probably like Diablos, Rapunzels around 40, Beasts, stuff like that. But yeah, now with this Tamatoa, it's looking a bit crazy. So Moyen, what are your thoughts on just the general power creep of these Sapphire cards, I guess I want to say, compared to the other rings, before we dive into anything in particular?
Yeah, but I'm a bit sad I didn't buy my cards on like pre-orders and stuff. I thought they would get cheaper, but I do still think they will like get cheaper from here. But I might have to wait a bit to get the cards into my hands. I actually don't. While like Scrooge and Tomatoes, they're like great cards. I think they're like fine, right? They're strong cards. They give some resources. They can occasionally be free, but then you have to like to make the Scrooge free. You need to like lose tempo setting it up. The card that I don't think is fine is Belle. It's like suddenly the best late game color, also cannot lose early game, or at least when it opens Belle. And then especially when like Blue Steel opens Belle with removal songs. So yeah, I think that is definitely dangerous with how strong Sapphire is right now. Personally, I love playing Sapphire. I don't mind a meta where there's a tier 0 deck, right? So like personally, I don't take a big issue with it, but I don't know, if you don't like playing Sapphire, it might be hard to be competitive.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you, to be honest, because it's obviously a color. I mean, specifically like Blue Steel, something you have an affinity for and you played in the past, even when it hasn't been recognized as the best deck. And now that it's gotten that piece that really took it over the edge, and you can maybe put it into tier 0, like, how do you reconcile that, and how do you feel? Because now your favorite deck and your favorite playstyle has been unlocked. Like all these things that maybe pissed you off before, where you're like, okay, I lost to this aggro opening or this burn deck, and I didn't have the pieces, and my deck was clunky. It's like all that's gone, and you just kind of have all the answers, and you're doing it playing a strategy that you just enjoy.
Yeah,
I'm assuming that doesn't get old too quick. I mean, you got to be enjoying it a bit.
No, yeah, I definitely am. It's the only problem is like the least fun thing about playing Sapphire or Sapphire Steel, Sapphire Steel specifically, is playing against Sapphire Steel as Sapphire Steel.
Classic.
So some maybe I think set 5 I thought Sapphire Steel was the best deck in the format, but I was like in the minority thinking that. So that was like a great place to be in. I didn't have to play mirrors, and I think I was playing the best deck. right now, I think there will be a lot of mirrors. There's still like a big split on how you can build it. I think we'll talk about the tournament results a bit later. There's like an Oswald build that's going around. It's not personally how I think the deck will be built moving forward. I don't think it's the strongest way you can build it, especially when you have mirrors in mind. But and there's still an interesting puzzle in figuring out how to perfectly build Sapphire Steel. It's just the reward at the end of that puzzle is missing a little bit right now with just like local tournaments.
Sure. Yeah. Well, before we dive into the decks and the results any further, we're going to jump into our Spilled Ink section. This is our listener question section. If you guys want to have your questions read out on next week's episode of the podcast, be sure to leave a comment down below or pop a comment into our Discord server as well. The first one is from Kim. She says, Moyen really wanting to show off that mustache. So, Brendan, I don't think you saw the episode last week, but Moyen was very up close and personal, which was quite funny. Yeah, he just recently moved back to Berlin, and his face was like here. So yeah, it was quite funny.
Yeah, okay, but I the comments made it seem like it was kind of my responsibility when I don't have any control over the final cut. I don't think I was sitting that close to the camera.
What was I supposed to do? Like expand your face or like decompress your face?
Feed. It was just completely zoomed in on my face.
Nah. I don't know what he's talking about, guys. The next comment is from Citizen Flabba. They say, I solved the BELLE problem. All we have to do is change her into a hyena. Rafiki clears. I laughed at this comment so much because while, in theory, sure, this 0-2 with Challenger +3 clears this 3-3. If you're on the draw and they're on the play, they'll just play BELLE and then they'll just do let the Storm Rage on your Rafiki and then you cry, pretty much. But I will say, it's still good that you pointed the card out. Like, if you're set on playing, honestly, like if you're set on playing Amethyst, maybe you might want to consider playing this card because it might actually help you clear the BELLE if they don't absolutely high roll and get the Storm Rage on. But I just had to laugh at the comment.
What card are we talking about?
You know the Rafiki? It's the one drop Rafiki with an Amethyst.
Okay. And what does it do?
It's a 0. I believe it's a 0-2 and it has Challenger +3.
The OG.
Okay,
Yep.
but that's not what we're talking about here, is it?
It is.
Is it? Wait, let me check the comment again. Why? What does that have to do with changing her into a hyena?
Because doesn't Rafiki have some text about like hyenas or something like that? Like, I remember the whole thing of Rafiki being, I don't know, maybe he doesn't take damage when he challenges hyenas. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure that's the comment they're trying to make.
Any chance hyenas can take no damage. I completely forgot about that line. I thought it was just like Challenger 3.
Yeah.
Like, hyenas didn't exist.
Hyenas still don't exist, right? Who plays hyenas?
No, in this hypothetical world where a hyena exists.
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
yeah, I forgot about that, my bad.
Yeah. And the next one's from Tristan. They say, can't wait. This comment made me laugh. They say, can't wait for them to eat their words. 0 testing but. When I see 0 testing but, I laugh. Feel like Amethyst Steel is going to be tier 1. Even playing Amber Steel, having a Calhoun in play, and then you play Penny on top of that. Trade with your pretty BELLE and survive. So, I don't know. I just think it's absolutely crazy to say, can't wait for them to eat their own words. 0 testing, by the way, but I feel like Amethyst Steel is going to be tier 1. Yeah. What I will say is, I still think that it's a combo worth pointing out in terms of giving your Calhoun resist +1, sure, to make the BELLE trade a little bit more favorable. I know, Moyen, you experimented with playing the Shield of Arendelle, right, as the 1-cost item. It might not to give like Calhoun specifically resist, right, but to give maybe your own BELLE resist and then be able to trade into their BELLE and maybe some type of idea for that. Do you want to speak upon the idea of the resist a little bit, and of course the comment?
Yeah, I mean the comment is very funny because, I mean, it's not like we have infinite testing, right? But I definitely tested quite a bit, and to inform any statements that I would make, and then to say, okay, but I know it so much better than you, even if I didn't do any testing. Well, maybe, but it doesn't sound super likely. I think the like Calhoun Penny is very good tempo to take out a 3-3. Of course, the 3-3 has to be exerted first. Why did it exert? If it wasn't to quest, because if that would become meta, then you just don't quest a BELLE into a Calhoun because the Penny Calhoun combination. So if it exerted, probably it already like sang a strength that got rid of your Calhoun, something like that. The Shield of Arendelle, I tested it first because to support Scrooge, you kind of just needed like a little bit more items, even more than just 4 Quill, 2 Dime, 4 Fortisphere, 4 Popsicle. But then you wanted like an 1-cost inkable item that can also banish itself, which would be helpful for setting up your 6-drop Tamatoa.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe that doesn't need to exert itself, so that it there's no downside when you tap it or when you exert it to set up a Scooch. And then Shield of Arendelle was one of the new toys that could be tried for that. And it could sometimes be nice to set up like a Bell trade on a Bell, or specifically to protect the Tamatoa from a Zeus to make it survive 1 turn and set up a free item. But especially when I've moved in my deck also to playing more Cogsworth, that interaction to protect the Tamatoa was a little bit less important. And the bigger thing was just I also retested the set 2 Last Cannon. Mm-hmm. And that card is just so much more impactful. The Challenger +3, even if you have to pay 1 to get that effect off, came up probably like 3 times as often as maybe the Shield of Arendelle did anything meaningful. So in the end, I really, really like the Last Cannon, as even if it's not the best card, but it fits what the deck wants to do and has some impact.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Last comment is from Bunny Fu Master. They say, I've really been enjoying Sapphire Emerald mid-range with Ink Geyser and some of the shift package. I think the main allure is the new hero is very hard to kill, and with your other shifts can close the game quickly. Ink Geyser is nice as a 2 or 3 of as basically instant win into Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst, because you can set up these boards full of warded characters that they can't interact with. And then the Ink Geyser also turns off all of their sweepers. The card is pretty bad into steel, both with either Diablo, Fishbone Quill, Tipo, or Inkcaster. You can get rid of it. There is certainly an argument that it's just worse. It's just a worse Sapphire Steel, but I do think Ink Geyser basically making Ruby Sapphire a 10-0 matchup is a plus. I don't know if it's a 10-0 matchup. That seems like a little bit of a bold statement, but I do think that this card may have impact in the future for reasons that you've mentioned in your comment, right? Like against certain decks. Like Ruby decks, for example, yeah, like being able to set up a pretty big board that can't be interacted with because they only have 3 ink and they can't play their big AoE removal cards. I think that could be pretty interesting in the future, but I still don't know if Sapphire Emerald is there yet, and even if it did get a lot of new tools in this set, I just don't think it's going to be able to compete nearly as much with Sapphire Steel currently, so for that reason, I don't think we're going to see too much Emerald Sapphire, at least at the start of the set. Maybe somebody will crack Ink Geyser or crack a certain build, but that's my initial thoughts anyways. What are your thoughts, Moyen Brendan, on the Ink Geyser package, right?
Well, it's like against Ruby Sapphire, for that to be a 10-0 matchup, you would need to, like the way the game would have to go is you always get ahead on board first, and then you would usually, maybe they would come back with a B prep, but then you lock them out. But I don't think that's the reality of how games always go against Red Blue. Red Blue is capable of sometimes just getting ahead on board themselves when they open, for example, like a Talam, Maui, Shark, or when they open a Quill into a very early clear and then set up a board, or very early Sisu. So I think those games will still exist where you can set them back in ink, but if you're behind on board, it won't matter as much. So I don't think it will be 10-0 matchup. But I think Green Blue is definitely capable of being favored, or like having a deck that's favored against Red Blue. But this meta requires more than just being able to beat Red Blue is I think the problem.
Mm-hmm. I want to segue into like a slightly different question, which is ask you, Moyen. What's the paradigm between Red Blue and Blue Steel right now in the new set?
What's the paradigm?
Yeah, so like how are they matching up against each other? Is Blue Steel just an objectively better deck? Mm-hmm. Is there a reason to play Red Blue anymore? And if so, why?
Yeah, so in my like limited experience from testing so far, it just really seemed like Blue Steel can put up a lot of threats, and most of that, or like almost every time, never runs out of cards. So usually the biggest drawback of Sapphire Steel used to be is that like Red Blue has answers to what Blue Steel does. Blue Steel doesn't really have answers to what Red Blue does. So you have to be very, very careful to never really give them time. But I think the decks Sapphire Steel cannot give Ruby Sapphire time for Ruby Sapphire to play their own Tamatoa freely onto a board or something like that. And the deck has gotten so much more consistent and so much better at continuously posing threats that Red Blue has to answer, and then Red Blue cannot really play for value as much, cannot set up their own threats as freely. So for those reasons, the matchup seems quite good for Blue Steel so far. The way that Red Blue can definitely still win the matchup, and it's not like a blowout matchup. I think maybe Sapphire Steel is a bit favored. The way that Red Blue can win the matchup is ramping to not just a board clear, but setting up a coin and then really getting to a quick board swing with like a Sisu or Medusas, and then really continuously also setting up their own board while removing. I think if Sapphire Steel can force Red Blue to be prep, it usually always has or almost always has new threats to pose after the be prep.
What about coverage over the rest of the metagame? Does Blue Steel have better matchups in aggregate over the rest of the metagame than Blue Red?
I mean, so the rest of the metagame has
that is the metagame. No.
It's just mirrors.
No, so I mean, right now, Red Blue and Blue Steel, they are very strong decks, especially Blue Steel. So outside of that, we're still in this phase where we have to figure out what decks that existed in the past will still exist like as a competitive deck. Like Red Purple is nowhere to be seen. Purple Steel was still like the third most played deck in and I think it's like the one deck where people have some belief in it still. It has a lot of like these burn options, but Purple Steel is also so much better at gaining early lore when it can like go a few turns unchecked, right? When it can open like one drop, and then they gain some lore, and then it can burn. But like even the one drops don't gain as much burn against Sapphire Steel, so Sapphire Steel is better against that for sure.
Exactly. I would have thought that Sapphire Steel would be better against that early aggression anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So against early aggression, it is still better. I don't know why. So I mean, right now I think Sapphire Steel is the best deck. I haven't found a reason. Like I haven't found a bad matchup of Sapphire Steel, and I haven't found a reason to play Red Blue over Sapphire Steel. And that might sound like very that might sound very discouraging, but like me not having found it or us not having found it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I think there's still value in looking for that. But still, I have to admit, right now I don't really know why I play anything else.
I've seen other people. By I say other people, there's literally one guy on Twitter I've seen who's trying to keep the red purple train alive, where he's like it. From just looking at the deck, it definitely looks weird, but maybe it does something, maybe it doesn't. He's basically just added like a lot more locations into the deck, where his game plan he's spoken about is more so focused on my opponent has to actually spend time to try and deal with these location threats, and while they're trying to deal with these location threats, they're not going to be focusing on my characters, so that's kind of how they close out the game. But even from some of the results and seeing like some of the results I've seen him put up, it's still like not anything crazy. Like he's probably like keeping red purple alive. This is a new game plan that it might be okay, but like Sapphire Steel seems to still be like dominating for the most part.
Sapphire Steel, I feel like it's been a garbage matchup for red purple for a while. Like the red blue matchup was significantly better, especially when red purple got the more aggressive package and was able to have that aggressive game plan to kind of cheat them out of some games. I mean, that's interesting. Yeah, so it seems like the consensus is around Sapphire Steel kind of being that tier 0 deck. But I mean, we are still early days. Moyen, what are your sort of first thoughts when you see all these knee-jerk reactions and people immediately declaring this as like a tier 0 unbeatable deck, calling for bans? Like, do you think that it's premature, or based off your testing, do you think that they might actually be right this time? Because we've seen this a million times. The set comes out, Jafar wheel is busted, Jafar's banned Jafar, etc. Right? And then it has never actually played out like that. How do you feel about those sort of accusations and conclusions about Sapphire Steel so early in the metagame?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely seen them. I wouldn't really compare this too much to like Jafar and everything, because with all of those, I think it was clearly like everyone knew it wasn't as clear as this is. Okay, not everyone. I think still we knew it's not as clear as this is definitely broken, right? And with this one, it's different because it does look very strong, and so. But still, in other games, I've also seen too many formats where the best deck was found very late into the set, or like after everyone thought everything's settled, we found the meta, and then a new deck emerges, and somehow it's like, oh, how could we have missed this? And a good example is the DKP Red Blue list from last set. Like that was found very very late in a format where there was a lot of very big tournaments, and I think I'm always try to be careful to ask for like bans, erratas, to complain too much too early into the set. I would definitely acknowledge. I think it's dangerous how strong Sapphire is. I think especially it being so good against aggression with BELLE in Sapphire Steel. Of course, it's dangerous, but I personally don't like calling for erratas. So the set's barely played yet.
Yeah. What I think is interesting, I have two thoughts. I mean, one I'll just say before because it doesn't require responses. I was thinking there at one point that my sort of litmus test for red purple is no, I'm not still playing red purple. I think if he is, then it has some glimmer of hope. If he ever is not playing red purple in a competitive tournament, I think that deck is done because that guy has played red purple literally every set, every single tournament, no matter what, and it has put up results. To be fair, and then. Yeah, of course, I forgot. Oh, the Sapphire card design is interesting, too, because I feel like face up, just like looking at the set from a spoiler perspective, a lot of these cards that ended up making their way into the deck were just clearly powerful and then was broken in the shell that was already dominating. I don't know, guys. You guys obviously agree with that because we evaluated the cards together and we're like, holy shit. But... yeah, I felt like when we were looking at the set before we played with the cards, it was like, okay, clearly we're missing something here. But now that some people are getting games in, it seems like we're not. Because those almost every single one of these cards was like, yeah, that just goes right into what is debatably the most powerful deck in the game right now. And Sapphire for the past few sets, I feel like has just gotten more and more and more powerful.
Yeah. You're speaking my language now, Brendan. Like, this is how I'm feeling, honestly.
Well, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying, and I do think it's funny as well. Just as you're talking about like this spoiler season, we spoke about it last week how they revealed the BELLE as like one of the last 4 cards to be revealed, and I got the starter decks early, so I saw this card because it was in the starter decks. But yeah, they kind of kept this BELLE to the very end, and it's the card that everyone's talking about. Like over the Tamatoa is a good card, like you said, Moyen. The Scrooge is an okay card. Coil, even if it's not really played, is still an okay card. But BELLE is just like it's the piece. It's what you're saying. It's this card that allows you to combat this early aggression, whereas usually a lot of these Sapphire decks, that's where they struggled, right? So but ultimately, I do want to say I agree with you, Moyen. Like I've seen a lot of people talking about, the power level is too strong. And I even, speaking in like my local Lorcana group chat, and I'm like, as someone who, I'm not the biggest fan of Sapphire. I think it's cool card design. I think that the decks are always cool that happen, but like, it's been a week. It's not even, you know what I mean? It's like, give it some time, and then I think people can. It's clear that this stuff is powerful, but I also agree with you that I'm not the biggest fan of. It's been a week of play and immediately absolutely get rid of these cards rather than ban them. Have at least a little bit of time to see if somebody can crack it. If they can't crack it, it's fine. And if it's clearly busted, it's clearly busted. But you also need to accumulate data, in my opinion, to really showcase that. Because then it's clear. Like, we can all say, oh, it's clearly powerful. But if you take a look at like 2-3 tournaments and let's say over 50% of decks have this card and the win percentage is X amount or whatever, and obviously it's hard maybe to accumulate some of that data, but yeah, I mean, that's when I think a decision should be made, when things are super clear for everyone. I don't think you should be calling for bans immediately, even if you find it a little bit unfun. I mean, I saw some people tweet this as well. I kind of agree. Like, people didn't like the bookie meta. I played Bookie and I didn't like the Bookie meta, you know? So it's personal preference for different types of people of what decks they like to play for sure, but you got to give it some time. But it's worth talking about for sure.
Or instead of giving it some time, you could make a post advertising your Metafy, saying you went 50-0 in testing, because that's fun. No, I mean, I do really want to talk about it because, well, to the consumer, so 50-0, does it happen in testing? I've never seen it. Could it happen in testing? Technically, yes. It's like 50-0, okay. So if it was meaningful testing in a new format, maybe the deck you found a very strong deck, you've tested maybe some good matchups, maybe it has a lot of good matchups. How good are they? Maybe 70%. 70% is a lot against a good player. But then also I looked at the list, and going 50-0 with it's not even built in a way where it's like super unlikely to brick, right? Even not bricking 50 times in a row, like that's not likely. So while it's not clear that 50-0 is an exaggeration, maybe 50-0 happened specifically, like maybe no one will ever be able to prove, I think it is extremely unlikely to go 50-0 in meaningful testing. I think personally, if you go 50-0 in testing, you need new testing partners, so maybe stop testing against like a 5-year-old. But I think using that as advertisement for something that you're selling, to me is very, very questionable.
Yeah, I want to jump in just briefly and say, like, there is this like general consensus of, you know, the content creator space and doing clickbait things, which I mean, I will say it. We do it at times, you know, most powerful deck ever, best deck in the format. I've seen Spessy do it, you know, 100% set champs.
You've
winning.
seen Spessy do it? Oh man, that must have been a rare occurrence.
But I do understand what you're saying to an extent as well, Moyen. There's a difference when stuff is like paywalled and stuff like that, for Metafy and stuff. And again, like, people, in my opinion, people, they can do what they want, but yeah, it is what it is. For me, I can understand why it's done. I can also understand why you're not too happy about it.
I mean, yeah, what I was gonna say is, like, I've been playing TCGs for a while. Like, it's the headlines and stuff are pretty much always like BS and exaggerated, but that doesn't really make them like useless. It's just kind of that's just how headlines are formatted in the content creation space. So I personally never take them super seriously. But yeah, I mean, I find it more, for me, I guess, as someone who's seen it a million times at this point, like, I just find it funny. As I'm seeing like all these things on Twitter, I'm seeing like 50-0s and like I'm like, okay, what is going on here? What's going on with Sapphire Steel that this is like the narrative that's going around it? Testing is a private curated environment. If you're going 50-0, like, what's going on? what are the parameters on this testing, right? Are we only testing against a specific deck? Are there no mirrors? Are we testing against like good players, bad players? Like, but ultimately, all those things, like, they just don't matter. Yeah, the deck is probably pretty good, to be fair. And I think you've seen that reflected in like everybody who's playing the game right now is like, yeah, this deck owns. And I think only tournaments can give you the guiding light on that ultimately, because that's the open environment where everybody has an equal chance to be rewarded. So the best deck comes out on top. That's where I get all my data. Yeah.
So also, I think it's totally reasonable to. I mean, not everyone has to have the same viewpoint as me, right? I think to most people, you will look at the tweet like that and you'll say, okay, maybe that's true, maybe that's slightly exaggerated. I don't really care. That's how this works. But then also, I was looking at, okay, how can I maybe monetize my presence in TCG? So
What do you mean?
Yeah, so I was like, okay, maybe I should also start a Metafy, write some guides. But then it's like, okay, is it really fair that, because I don't want, like, okay, of course, maybe there's advertisement you'd have to do, right? But I don't want to go to the length of saying, 50-0. But then if you don't do it, I guess you have a disadvantage in selling stuff.
Look, you don't do these. Moyen's guide only went 25-0. Just
Yeah, I was
disgusting.
like, oh no, I went like 25-5. And I was like, oh shit, but this guy went 50-0. So your guy sucks.
I went 49-1. Oh my god, dude, this is a useless guy. Nah, it's the I don't know. The early stages of a metagame are highly sensationalized around win rates and bans and emotions, and I don't know. It's just it is what it is, and we can all. I think we should all pour one out for, or at least we gotta sort of tip our the man who taught the Lorcana space how to do it. I really like Spessy, by the way. I just like to give him shit because he's the master clickbaiter.
All right, speaking of the master clickbaiter, we're going to show you the best decks within Lorcana from this past weekend as we jump into the tournament breakdown. All right, so taking a look at the 10Ks tournament that happened at SSG. This is a Sapphire Steel deck. But yeah, this Blue Steel deck it's the same deck that Zan played. Zan ended up in 3rd place. It's literally card for card. If I swap tabs here, it's like...
one card different.
Oh, is it?
It's like a Tipo in a workshop swap.
Okay, cool. Tipo in a workshop difference. But yeah, I mean, Moyen, you're the expert on Blue Steel, so would love to hear your initial thoughts on this deck. It is interesting to see that, even though it's only a single copy, the Shield of Arendelle is in there, so there was some similar ideas with that. But the biggest difference is, you've got the Oswald package in here, a lot more items, the Maurice workshop stuff. And another thing that's notable is and then along came Zeus, mainly because I know this is something that you asked Harlan last week in the previous episode. Would you consider Zeus if sharks are still very prominent within the meta? But then equally, let's say we took sharks out of the conversation, like you said, Moyen, Zeus is also a target that can actually easily take out the new 6-cost Tamatoa if it's not, if there's not a Cogsworth on board or whatever. But yeah, general thoughts on this list. Would love to hear it.
Yeah, so this list still does like what the new powerful thing that Blue Steel wants to do, right? It still has infinite threats that replace themselves. It has the early bell and tempo songs. It has Lava Shams, Tamatoas, Dimes. So it can do all of the things that I guess my deck does as well. It does play a lot more in Incubates, but because of that, it also enables itself to have a lot more explosive games with the Oswald. With just two. So I actually like Zan's version probably slightly better because it's a little bit more consistent in its opening lines. I think you can very reasonably open Ramp on 2 into a Scrooge, and that's decent tempo, especially with a bell. Or you can go Oswald into Quill. Those would be like two very prominent lines of the deck. And with 3 Tipo, this just like can do that a little bit more often when it misses like the Oswald Quill opening. So I think this deck's incredible against Ruby decks. I think Oswald, while it's not much better than Chicha, but now we have like some better item payoff for having items in play with the Scrooges, with the Tamatoas, with the belts. So it's definitely gotten better. Usually it was just straight up worse than Chicha. Now it's like a little bit more comparable, or in this version also better. I would imagine. But it comes at the downside of playing 4 uninkable 2-1s in your deck. And if your opponent, like, I stayed away from building stuff. I stayed like this at the start because I was like, okay, I already don't see how I'm not favored against a lot of the decks in the format, even when I'm not playing like Oswald High World stuff. And then if in the mirror, and I think mirror will be very, very prominent, very prevalent. I don't think I want to have 4 uninkable 2-1s in my deck where I'm kind of forced to play them at times, even if my opponent opens spell on 1 and is threatening to Storm Rage on it. And I think that can be a huge downside. What speaks for it in the mirror, okay, at least it gets a lot of items into play. So once it gets to cheat out a dime, or and then it has a lot of items to actually finish games very, very quickly off the Tamatoa. Or let's say against a Blue Steel deck that also doesn't play like Let It Go or Hades, where you can reasonably expect a Tamatoa to stick. It can end games really quickly once it gets there. But before that, you can easily lose board because your deck plays more uninkables. The workshops can clock your hand, the Oswald can clock your hand, the Zeus. So there's still, and with 3 dimes, so there's like a higher risk, and I don't think it's better in the mirror. I'm playing my LCCC match against the Red, who's playing a similar list. Also an Oswald Blue Steel list, but with only 2 big Tamatoas, where I think I'm quite favored against that. And usually the way the games goes, I win I'm slightly more favored to win the board early because of the Oswalds. And then I can lock up the board quickly because I play Cogsworth, and then with the Cogsworth I can protect Tamatoa. So like I'm generally getting ahead early, but I also need to get ahead early because otherwise I can really struggle to maybe remove the Tamatoas if I don't get a big strength off, and then they can end the game quicker than me because they will get more items in play. I think the choosing to play Tipo in this type of deck instead of Sail is very interesting to me. I think generally I would view Sail as the baseline better card just because this deck can use the 1 ink very, very well that you get to immediately spend on turn 2. But what I do like about it is, okay, 1, Tipo sets up an extra body for strength that can be relevant, but also if your opponent does play like an early Singer 3, and you have this Oswald and Tipo in hand, maybe you can just say, okay, I will. This game is not an Oswald game. I will not play an Oswald game. The deck can completely function without it. I will just Tipo the Oswald away and just play a normal game. So I mean, with my deck, I think against this deck I'm favored, but it's nothing crazy, and I do think this deck can be better against even better against some of its good matchups. I don't think that's necessary, which is why I still prefer playing it without the Oswald, but I think this is like an incredibly strong deck regardless.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, Sapphire Steel, let's say it is the best deck and nothing can beat it. And let's say it gets to like some ridiculous metagame share, 40% plus. What are your paths to increasing your advantage in the mirror? And if the metagame share got egregious, like how degenerate could you get in terms of like what kind of cards did you add to really get an edge if you were heavily expecting mirrors?
I'm also gonna I'm gonna move on to your deck as well, Moyen, just as you're talking about this, just to see Moyen's particular build.
I've already done some of those steps, but I still try to stay like super consistent. It's just 6 unincubates. So what are the steps that you can take? I think Cogsworth can be good in the mirror. It's not good in all situations. Sometimes it's a little bit slow, but if you ever get ahead, it can like quickly lock out a game. And it protects the Tamatoa from removal very, very efficiently. So I do think Cogsworth is a very, very efficient card in the mirror still. That's like the first place where I would go to, because against any fast deck, going Tamatoa, that's still like very, very quick. Because the 4/4 is just a very good body into going into the Cogsworth. So like Cogsworth is a way you can tech in the mirror that doesn't really hurt your other matchups. Then what else can you do? So one thing that I've definitely seen people do is play more Bengers. But that was also because most people like to play Workshop in this. I don't think you have to play Workshop in this. 1, because it's uninkable. 2, because it is actually quite slow and a little bit clunky. And even against Ruby decks, I really, really don't run out of cards, even when I don't play Workshop. So it's like, it's not really necessary to go there. And if you go there, then you open yourself up to being a lot more susceptible to tech cards like Bencher. So that's also a weakness of the Oswald deck that I didn't mention. It's like a lot more reliant on Workshop, on Quill. And by relying more on those, you also open yourself up to Bencher, which is another tech card that could be included. But I think to avoid getting teched against, you could also just try to play a build that doesn't rely on Workshop and Quill as much. And then the next step is, how many Zeus do you play? I think you probably want to play a few copies of Zeus, or at least 1 copy of Zeus, which I didn't opt to include here, if there's like a lot of mirrors and sharks in the format, especially if blue steel decks don't set up Tamatoas often enough that don't have resist. So like no Shield of Arendelle, no
Cogsworth,
not a lot of Cogsworth. With the resist 1, the Zeus gets countered quite a bit. And then after that is, do you play some sort of removal for the big Tamatowers. Could be a Hades, could be Let It Go. Hades, like Let It Go. It's been the same in these color combinations always. Let It Go is just a bit shit. Hades is pretty good, but it's uninkable and very expensive. So none of these cards you really want to be playing, but that's how degenerate you could get. I think so. Then I want to talk about one more card that I've seen people talk about, but I don't think it matters. It's like you can play I Find Them, Flatten Them, and play Hideaways. But this deck, I think at least the color combination, depending on how you build it, is so capable of winning the board and winning it over and over again and refilling it when it's removed. It's like you can remove my items, but that doesn't stop me from doing what I want to do. It's like I don't, and I think on top of that, item removal and I Find Them Flat and others, it's like awful cards in other matchups if other matchups exist, and usually they always exist because there's just enough people that don't like playing the best deck in the game, right?
Is Pete super essential in the mirror?
No, it's not. I think you could play less Pete. It's like Pete's just like good card that's good against tempo decks, sets up a singer consistently. It's very good against Ruby decks, but like in the mirror, you don't have to play it.
That's what I figured. As if the Ruby representation went down, you can maybe cut back on some of those. And I'm assuming like cards like Micduck Manor are probably just too slow at this point.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely one of the weaker points of the deck is locations, right? It's gotten a little bit better against it because suddenly you have like an extra 3 strength on the board of a Belle, or like you can cheat out a Scooch, so you can develop a board that can the turn after take out is a little bit better at taking out locations. I think with the Last Cannon, which I actually think might stick with the deck, you also have a little bit more play against it, but in the mirror, it's always been a slow card in the mirror, because in the mirror there's never a reset button, right? There's no overextending to the board. The more you extend to the board, the better it is. So you don't need to diversify your threats because there's no B prep in the mirror.
Yeah.
But I think like
worried that Zan's list would be too combo oriented with the Morris workshops. That you could put down a Micduck Banner, but 2 incremental lore per turn would just be
just not
insignificant compared to like a game going late, and there's like combo potential with Tamatoas and Dimes and things.
Yeah,
like
but against Zan's deck, it's really if they like play a Tamatoa and gets to cheat out a Dime after they've done some stuff, that can get dangerous really quickly. So that's also a problem, because playing a mana doesn't help you find strength or strength and storm, and it doesn't play more characters that help your strength deal more damage. So like a 5 damage strength can like end a game against Zan's deck.
So Micduck Manor only exploits this deck's weakness to challenge things on board, but I assume that Micduck Manor's the upside of it not being challenged, which is your incremental war game per turn, is just too slow and insignificant in the current power level of Sapphire decks.
Yeah, but
that's what I would assume.
Yeah. So in Sapphire Steam mirrors, that's completely true. That being said, I think paired with Ruby, location strategies can do completely fine against this deck.
Because you can be prep and
like Ruby Amethyst can play off locations, or Ruby Sapphire with locations, I think can have a very reasonable matchup against this, and it might take some time to figure out if it can be favored or how Sapphire Steel would adapt to that. But I think that's like a reasonable approach to tackle Sapphire Steel.
For sure, yeah. Moving, I say slightly away from Sapphire Steel, we're going to look at the second place deck list, which was a Ruby Sapphire deck. Actually, quite an interesting one, playing a lot of the new cards. We can see the 6-cost Tamatoas in there, some Scrooges, some of the new Ruby Sapphire Dual Link BELLE. I've seen some people talk about this card, and again, I haven't seen too much of this deck played yet, but I can imagine that, if you have a certain sequence, like a certain opener, if you open with this turn 1 BELLE, you could shift this, 7/7 quest for 3 BELLE, maybe relatively, like, quite early on in the game. What is it, probably like turn 3, turn 4 maybe? Have you seen this deck play out a little bit more, or have you done much testing? This is a very kind of unique build of Ruby Sapphire for sure, but I'd just like to hear your general thought on the kind of BELLE opener with the shift in this deck specifically.
Yeah, I've actually not thought about it enough. I'm just looking at the list for the first time. So I'm definitely interested in new red blue ideas, but I can't give too much input myself.
Yeah, that would be the follow-up is like, I mean, you could just go back to the metagame dynamics of the previous like 2, 3, 4, even maybe like 5 sets, which is, okay, you're playing Sapphire Steel, the metagame skews heavy Sapphire Steel at one point. You can't get enough edge in the mirror, but maybe you can play some sort of degenerate Ruby Sapphire deck that is able to exploit Sapphire Steel. There is some sort of inflection point when Sapphire Steel is just fundamentally too powerful, too fast, has too many recursive threats, has too much card draw that Ruby Sapphire in its removal essence just doesn't really affect it. But that's at least where my mind would go, would be, can I get an edge in the Sapphire Steel meta as we develop more and more into a myopic Sapphire Steel metagame? And if not, can I look towards other control decks like Ruby Sapphire that's traditionally done well against it? Because clearly, or at least it seems like it, that the old school, or at least the previous way of dealing with Sapphire decks in the form of playing more aggressive or faster decks is no longer an option. So you need to compete with them on a separate axis.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with that. There has been some talk of that as well when discussing Sapphire Steel versus Ruby Sapphire. Of can you basically just? It's like what Moyen was talking about, though, right? It's like, can you just like ramp to your removal? Can you kind of keep clearing them, make them run out of gas? But it seems very much like Sapphire Steel just has so much gas that it might not be enough to slow it down, right? So
yeah, so default Ruby Sapphire is now potentially like just fundamentally weaker than Sapphire Steel when they compete or they play the same game plan. But maybe Ruby gives you access to tools to be just particularly degenerate in that matchup, and then if your metagame is going close to 50% or more Sapphire Steel, maybe there's something that Ruby can offer you in these Sapphire decks that allows you to edge out that matchup. Yeah,
this deck definitely has some of the kind of broken combo-y stuff we've heard of, spoken about before. You've got this unconventional tool. You play the unconventional tool, and you can play the Belle, and you can get
my nickname in high school, actually.
And then you can play the Sapphire Coil as well. But yeah, I'd be interested to mess around with this deck a little bit. Obviously, it performed quite well. I'd be curious to see what Jonathan's matchups were, how many Sapphire Steel he faced, how much Sapphire Steel he tested against. But definitely cool to see Ruby Sapphire still doing pretty well.
Follow up and call you out there because you said I'd be interested to test this out. Are you interested to test this out? I mean, what are you doing? What are you doing in this metagame?
You got me, Brendan. I'd be interested to see other people test this out. Let me say that.
Yeah. What are you gonna play? What's what? Like,
Don't do
let's
this
say you
to
had a
me,
tournament
Brendan.
next weekend. What are you playing? Yeah, you gonna
Radiant
play a
Tramp.
deck?
I can't say the same deck that I've played the whole time, but I spoke about it last week that if the meta became so board based, then maybe I'd be able to play Amber Emerald again, because if Sapphire Steel's whole game plan is just kind of playing cards to the board. But I just honestly at this stage, I think even with the discard package and stuff, I don't think if I discard Sapphire Steel down to like nothing, they've got, like you keep saying, Moy, they've got so much gas that I feel like I just still lose the game. So
yeah, but some of those cards that's playing to the boards a lot of them are items. They're not characters.
Yeah,
it's like you can't really interact with that. Like even if you're removing all their characters, like they're still
they top deck a Tam, they top deck a Hiram, they top deck, and it's just, and then the recursion with the Tamatoas and stuff is just too much from how much they're going to keep drawing.
Yeah.
So
Sapphire
honestly,
breaks the game on multiple axes, on like multiple sins of TCG card design. It's both like an incredible ramp deck where Lorcana design has like some of the shittiest removal you'll ever see in a card game. It's like hyper inefficient. But then at the same time, it's like some of the best ramp I've ever seen in a card game, and some of the best like recursion I've ever seen in a card game, which are like debatably like worse sins to commit in design than good removal. I remember I saw a Twitter thread, not to tangent too much, about like, if we print lightning bolt 3 damage.
I saw that. Yeah.
Like then it would finally kind of be okay. Which I don't know if that's particularly wrong, because I think that the sort of the pillars of design are scaling like very asynchronously right now, where removal is still like in the absolute gutter. And for a while there, removal's been in the gutter since set 1, in my opinion. Like, be prepared, is okay, but it's very expensive. The reason why Peep Bear became a better card, it became a more playable card, is because Ramp got so much better and got so many more tools. But for a while there, removal stayed as ass as it was in set 1. Aggro and aggressive strategies got very good. Disruptive strategies, discard, got very good. And then over those the next few sets, Ramp just got all the tools it needed. It was able to answer early threats. It was able to get way more consistent. It got Inkables to be able to ramp more consistently as well. And also just recursive threats. There are so many recursive threats in this game. There's almost no way, at least from what I understand, there's almost no way to actually interact with that recursion other than race it or have recursive threats yourself. The card advantage is just ridiculous.
And there's not enough recursive recursive removal, if that makes sense. There's no way to remove something, get some removal back again. You know what I mean?
That reminds me of the 7-cost banish a character, draw a card, and the energy blast.
Oh yeah, the card that you were testing, right? Where you're like, oh, maybe this is actually okay in the mirror match.
Yeah, it was good in the DKP mirror.
7 cost unthinkable, banish 1 card, draw a card. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just funny because if you draw parallels to Magic's card designs and Magic's ramp cards and Magic's removal cards, so many of our cards on a removal basis, obviously different resource system, are so much worse, and then our ramp cards are on par, if not better. That's why you have these just insane strategies, and then just recursion in general is probably one of the most dangerous card design card concepts. It absolutely. Flesh and Blood had 1 recursive card in its game, and it was by far the most broken card they've ever created. It probably could be unbanned now, but absolutely broke the game in half. It was just, and it was a piece of shit. It was terrible. It was the worst thing. But just being able to, in that game, out attrition your opponent by having effectively this card just infinitely looped it fundamentally broke the entire design of the game. But Lorcana has that on absolute steroids.
Yeah, back to the point about what deck would I play, unfortunately. There was actually a deck that came with the top 8 here, and I think this is the one that I was interested in. Yeah, I'm going to go over here. So this is an Amber Emerald one. Oh yeah, sorry. This is not the deck because this has some very weird card choices in it, let me say. But the idea of the deck is still a little bit interesting to me. So, I mean, looking at this deck straight off the bat, it's Lemon Lime, it's Amber Emerald, and it's aggro. You've got the daisies in there, you've got the Rapunzels, you've got the Lilos. But the cool new tool that Amber Emerald got this set is there's a lot more discard interaction in terms of wanting to discard more of your character cards in order to get your Chernobog out a little bit earlier, and wanting to have more cards on the board to make your Tramp cheaper so that you can play Tramp a little bit early, and then you can then follow that up with the Chernobog. So honestly, this is probably the shell I would like to test around with it. I think I sent you a version of this Moyen that somebody else played that I definitely liked a little bit more. There are definitely some questionable cards in this particular list, but even just seeing the Nala as a 0/4, some people be wondering oh, why is this card even being played? It can be pretty good with a Rapunzel and stuff, so I would probably test out a shell of this, even though, if I'm being completely honest, I still tend to find aggro decks like this to be not the most fun to play. I'm still just kind of playing characters, just turning them sideways.
Bro, we're playing an aggro deck too. We play a 3/3 on turn 1. Beat that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, beat that. I just shake your hand and walk away from the table. That's what I do. But yeah, looking at some of the other lists as well. This is the top 4 list. It's another Ruby Sapphire.
I mean, this looks exactly like this is I took my previous set deck and just added in the the new good cards.
Yeah,
the clearly good cards.
Pretty much from the looks of it, right? You still got the Merry Sharks in there. Put the 6-cost Hams in. Put some of the Sapphire Coil in. Still even has Pirate's Life to help out a little bit against more of the aggressive decks. The next deck that we're gonna have a look at here is Emerald Steel.
Yeah, this is one I was particularly interested in.
Yeah, so this deck got honestly, the only real upgrade in my opinion that it got was this Emerald Steel Pete, and it made the morph line a little bit better, because previously I wasn't a fan of Emerald Steel with the morph and beast shift, and because it was only pretty much the Diablo, the beast, and maybe a Tinkerbell that was there for the morph. I didn't really feel like that was worth it for playing the morph package. So in the end, towards the end of set 6, I would have just preferred to play the more aggressive version of Emerald Steel that Zan played with like the merfolks and the docks, and you can and the muses, and then you can kind of bounce your own dock to the muses, get some more card draw. But looking at this deck, it seems fine. It's probably still gonna just do what Emerald Steel does. I tested the new Pete a little bit, and I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was anything too spectacular, unfortunately. So again, I could be wrong because I've only done a little bit of testing with this deck, but it just very much seems like the same shell. It was a decent deck last set. It was a decent deck the set before. It's probably still fine now, but comparatively to Sapphire Steel, I really don't think this is doing much. Like, sure, if you get your Ursula out and it sticks, you can sing a few removal songs and maybe you can gain a little bit of tempo back. Obviously, it is notable that this 2-cost Ursula helps out a little bit more, especially if we think all of these Sapphire decks are going to be playing these removal songs. Strength is inkable, so most of your Sapphire Steel opponents are going to be inking that, but Stormray John isn't, so if you're on the play, Ursula can hit that, which is nice, but that's always been the case if you're just playing against even like Amber Steel back in the past. So honestly, initial impressions is this deck is probably fine, but I don't think it's going to have a place in the meta unless it adapts very differently. Like, I don't think this Pete is the new savior of the deck, but curious to hear your thoughts on it, Moyen and Brendan.
Yeah, no, I think when you get to reasonably efficiently have an exerted Pete on the board, I think it can be an absolute menace, right? Suddenly no exerting to sing against Sapphire Steel. The resist +1 5/5 is huge body. So if you can get that off quickly enough, you can probably get into some very good race situations. But I would agree, it's like I think it's a decent upgrade, but I'm not sure. I think that the deck will still be fine, but like not crazy.
Brendan, any thoughts?
I mean, everything else got better, and this pretty much stayed the same. So, like, I don't know. Like, I never played a lot of Emerald Steel to begin with. I definitely spectated a lot of it and commentated a lot of it. But just from a fundamental basis, like, unless this is attacking Sapphire Steel on an axis that a lot of other decks aren't, which I guess it kind of is, but I think that Sapphire Steel got better early game threats, better card draw, and it's just a faster and more efficient shell. I can't imagine that this deck is better positioned against Sapphire Steel than it previously was, and it didn't get many upgrades, at least so far. We can see that maybe the list will be innovated.
I also think the Morph is just so susceptible to that removal. You don't even need a Stormrage on it. You just play a Strength if you really want to kill the Morph. Like, I'd expect maybe the Emerald Steel decks to still be playing like Calhoun's, because like they're not as easily removed, so like they're a little bit better on turn 2. But I mean, ultimately, if you're trying to play the Pete, you want to have the Morphs in there as well. So yeah, I'd be curious to see how this fares against the Sapphire Steel decks, but I can't imagine it's super good if you're trying to do the Morph plan the whole time.
So is Ruby Amethyst like well and truly like kind of deleted at this point before it gets a complete refresh?
I don't know. We've said this at the start of many sets, Brendan, right? We're like, oh, Red Purple's finally dead. It's not coming back. But like, you know.
Yeah, but Sapphire Steel has beat the shit out of Ruby Amethyst for a while. It just hasn't been like a very popular deck. I think it was like we would look at Ruby Sapphire and we're like, okay, Ruby Sapphire finally got the tools, can finally deal with this. And like Ruby Amethyst would still kind of edge it out and would still be decent. And was just a powerful deck, so it had good metagame coverage. But I feel like, since set 2, I would say Ruby or Sapphire Steel has just been a menace for Ruby Amethyst to deal with.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, Moyen, you might be able to speak to this a little bit more than me, but from what I've seen, the whole kind of Flynn package just has to go out the window now for Ruby Amethyst, because you're playing a Flynn 2/2. Usually you do your Flynn Sisu line. They're playing a 3/3 on turn 1. It's just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do against that, mate. Like, what do you think, Moyen? Like, do you think the idea that I mentioned earlier of like maybe adding the more locations in? I mean, you kind of said it yourself, right? Where it's like locations get better when they're paired with Ruby because you have stuff like B prep and stuff. Do you think that's maybe a direction that Ruby Amethyst could go, even if it's potentially not enough? It could be like the best thing you can do.
Yeah, I think you're on point. It's like, I think that's the best direction for it, but I'm not sure it's like good enough or anything. The problem is, it also depends on how Sapphire Steel is built, right? This location into B prep synergy usually gets whacked by Dime and Pete. So if there's like less Petes, I can't imagine there being less than 2 Dimes. Maybe you can kind of get that strategy off, but as long as Sapphire Steel play a good amount of dimes and peats, like cards that they can develop when they're expecting a B prep, this strategy just doesn't usually cut it against them.
Yeah. There's one other deck that was we haven't mentioned yet, which is just it's the Amethyst Steel deck, and the biggest upgrade that this deck got was the Giant Cobra, which is the 3-cost inkable 4/4 quest for 1 with Vanish, which is the on play you may choose and discard a card to gain 2 lore. It's a pretty good addition to the deck, honestly, because you're just playing a 3-cost 4/4. Obviously susceptible, it has the Vanish, so susceptible to removal a little bit, but it's pretty good in the early game because you don't have to use the discard effect, and it's pretty good in the late game because it's a bit of a burn card. But yeah, I also don't know, besides that, how much Amethyst Steel has gotten in terms of an upgrade. I did test this against Sapphire Steel a little bit. Granted, not against the current versions. Like, I played it against kind of Harlan's aggro blue steel, but it still had the, you know, turn 1 Belle type of stuff. And sometimes I got over the line, but it was pretty tricky, to be honest. Like, yep. I could see, like you said, Moyen, I could see why this was still probably the third most represented deck for this tournament. Because it performed pretty well last set.
One thing that it can definitely do is kind of like, it has such high quality of good 4-drops, like good uninkled 4-drops. It can adapt to the meta very well, right? I think last set, at the end of last set, it moved away from playing genies towards playing more rabbits, because red-blue was the main thing that they wanted to beat, and genie was just like drawing a card less and dying or getting banished by a very similar removal than rabbit would. Now I think Genie is the better tool that they have to combat Sapphire Steel. Of course, they could find, if they can remove it with Strength or Storms, that is very unfortunate, but if that is ever not the case, and then you quest for 2, maybe protect it with a Repeat for a little bit, it can definitely be a very efficient way to try to target them. It's definitely much, like rabbit would just be far too slow to deal with Sapphire Steel. So I think that is interesting, right? That they just can kind of choose the threat that is better suited for their expected meta game.
Yeah, for sure. Any thoughts, Brendan, on this deck in particular?
No, I think we've covered it completely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I was actually pretty excited for a lot of the Vanish cards, in the context of like.
Oh yeah, I go the genie killer, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, just a potential mid-range metagame, and that's basically the opposite of what we have. So I don't think that the Vanish cards are going to get the shine. What happens if it's Hiram,
mid-range?
by the way? No, it's not. I don't think.
Plays early threats, mid-game threats, late-game threats, plays for tempo all the time.
It's just a go deck. It's just a combo deck that's an aggro mid-range control deck.
Yeah.
That's what's up. What happens if you ban Hiram?
What happens if you ban Hiram? Man, they do you guys remember the thing that they did where they like there was like a update on the app or like a leak on the app where Hiram got changed to only draw 1 card instead of 2, but that never actually happened. Like that was just kind of.
I remember.
What do you think if Hiram got changed to that? How much does that change things? The card's still probably going to be played, right? It is a significant nerf, but
significant nerf.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would play it anymore. It's like already Tala is then extremely comparable in power level. But I think everything else that Sapphire has, like in Sapphire Steel has, might just still be enough, right? It loses
play workshops instead or something.
Yeah, maybe it plays like Oswald Workshop, or maybe just plays Tala instead of, and then it has like Tala and McDuck, and okay, it has some more items in play for the McDucks. It has a little bit less card draw, but it has still a 3/3 singer. Gets to pick a card. I think we're far past the point where Flavasham is the issue. I think also like the red-blue action-heavy list can totally play like 2 Flavashams. It's completely okay. Mm-hmm. So if Flavasham got banned, that deck would still be very, very strong. It wouldn't get hurt by as much either.
So you're saying that Belle is probably the prime target, right? Out of everything.
Yeah,
if you had to ban a card right now, I know you don't want to, but if you had to ban a card now.
Sure. No, I don't think Belle is healthy. So if we'd have to ban a card, it would probably be that. I think if you ban anything,
lightning bolt.
No, I don't know.
I don't think that would do much. Like,
yeah, me neither.
You still gotta go 1 for 1 on the Belle.
Oh yeah, so I can 1 for 1. Great.
Yeah, I can 1-for-1. I 1-for-1, and then this deck has the best card draw, recursive threats. Like, it's like you can't 1-for-1 a deck that's just gonna outvalue you in the mid game like 3 turns later.
Yeah, plus like 1-for-1 removal. Like in that instance, the threat is still the better card than the removal because it's good when there's no target to remove. It's like always.
To be fair,
like,
Lightning Bolt would have to be. It would have to
be
be
lower
able
or
to-
deal 3 damage. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Which is gain 3 lower or deal 3 damage?
Choose one. It's a modal card, so it's 2 choices. You choose one.
Well, we
deal 3
already
damage,
know
or
that
deal
that
3
just
lower.
wouldn't be a card because of, like, you know, we've got 2-cost uninkable songs that say, like, gain a lore and draw a card. Like, you know, it's like...
and 2-cost uninkable gain 2 lore.
Yeah, exactly. That's not a song, so... yeah.
Well, this Lightning Bolt would be an action.
Mm-hmm.
It would be an action. And I guess it would be uninkable. But yeah, it would still be power creep. But I don't think it would. I still don't think it would. Well, maybe the gain 3 lore part would be pretty aggressive. Like that would be pretty powerful. But yeah, deal 3 damage definitely not enough. It has to be both. It's gonna be busted.
There's also some interesting... I don't know why this popped into my brain. This is definitely a little bit of a tangent. I just know how we're always laughing about how Emerald gets all of this, like, oh, damaged character synergy. If your opponent has 50 damaged characters, win the game. Like, you know? But I found it funny because I think this was a design choice in Hearthstone where there were some cards that were like, you know, deal X amount of damage to undamaged characters. Which it's a bit of a like weird one because that card's probably just fine, obviously depending on what the amount of damage being dealt is. But that seems like some interesting design. I don't know, I just like would prefer cards like that maybe compared to all of this like damaged stuff. It just, I don't know, I'm venting a little bit because Emerald is just in the bin right now, but hey.
Yo, thank God. RIP.
Yeah. RIP, yeah. No,
Yes, I mean, Emerald was getting some goodies for a while, but yeah. I just think that Sapphire card design is funny because, I mean, it just depends how far away they designed it out. But if you looked at the metagame and you looked at the popular Sapphire decks at any time, most of the additions were just strict upgrades to what was already like a borderline super powerful deck.
I would say since set 3, since set 2, since Flabbersham came along, every set since there's been like a significant good Sapphire card. So
yeah, but to be fair, I think during reveal season a lot of the talk was, oh, Ruby Sapphire didn't get that much, and then people are complaining, yeah, but it didn't need that much. It's like it's crazy deck already. Fair. But I think after all, Red Blue, okay, you can build it with Coil. You don't have to. It's not. It's arguable that either version could be better. I don't think Red Blue has got much, but Sapphire Steel, like Scrooge, Belle, and Tamatoa, they're all so much better for Sapphire Steel than they are for Ruby Sapphire. Yeah, so Sapphire Steel has just gained an insane amount of crazy good cards.
yeah.
Nobody's asking wheel or no wheel anymore. It used to be a conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, some people they will never let the wheel down. They're still playing wheel in this.
Yeah, we're also getting close. At least some of these versions, like I'm pretty sure Zan's does this do it? Yeah, there you go. Look at that price tag right there. $672. We're getting close to the $800 range of the Emerald Steel deck back in like set 4. So yeah. I don't know. Interesting times. You know, we're gonna have
the crazy part to me is that it's this expensive with no DLCs. By the way, there's hardcore ladder again on Pixel 1 Connect. So I actually played my first game today. I might actually play that a bit more over the next days. Maybe stream it as well. It's webcam games now, right? But still, hardcore ladder is really important for my enjoyment of playing there.
Yeah, okay. If you guys enjoyed this week's episode of the podcast and listening to us talk about the most powerful ink within Lorcana, Sapphire, be sure to listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your local podcast platform. Leave us a review as well. It helps so much. There's a video version of this available on YouTube at youtube.com/@Podcana podcast. Hit the subscribe while you're there. We are so close to 5k subscribers. Please make it happen, everybody. click that subscribe button. Twitters are at Brendan APG, at Moyen_HS, and at Kawatech_CG. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
And one last thing, tune in tomorrow for the LCCC match. It's 2 p.m. EST. I'll play against the Red on an Oswald Sapphire steel build.
Well, tomorrow is a subjective term. What day is it?
All right. It's Thursday, 13th of March, 2 p.m. EST.